They burned her ranch at dawn, thinking they were erasing a quiet widow and her patch of hard-won land from the map. Smoke rolled across the flats like a dirty promise, and the men rode away laughing, sure the fire would finish what threats hadn't. By noon the flames had eaten the barn, the corrals, and the small white house where a woman named Eliza May Calder had learned to sleep alone. Eliza stood on the ridge while it burned. She did not cry. Cheers were for funerals, and she'd already buried enough in her life. She watched until the last beam collapsed, then turned her back to the smoke and began walking. Most folks in Wyoming Territory knew Eliza as the widow who kept to herself. She traded eggs and leather in town, spoke politely, paid on time, and asked for nothing. Her hands were scarred, her gaze steady. Children whispered that she never blinked. Men called her unlucky and crossed the street. No one knew the truth of her past, and no one thought to ask. The land baron who wanted her ranch, Caleb Rourke, had decided patience was for weaker men. He'd tried buying her out, then bullying, then hiring a few loud mouths to scare her. When she refused, he sent the torch. By nightfall, Eliza had reached the timberline. She built a small fire, cooked what little she'd saved, and slept wrapped in a wool blanket, the stars sharp above her. In the morning she cut west, moving through the draws and gullies where hoofprints vanished and sound carried poorly. She traveled light, with a bedroll, a canteen, a flint, and a long, plain knife she kept sheathed at her hip. The knife had belonged to her father. Eliza learned to hunt before she learned to read. Her father had raised her high in the Wind River Range, where winter taught lessons fast and mistakes cost blood. He believed rifles failed when you needed them most and taught her to trust steel and sinew. When she was 16, a mountain lion took 2 calves in one night. Her father tracked it into the rocks. The cat turned, cornered, and charged. She remembered the sound of its breath, the weight of its body as it struck, the way fear sharpened everything until the world became a single clean line. She remembered driving the knife where it had to go, remembering the lessons she'd been taught, remembering to keep her feet. She walked away that day with scars and a truth. Violence was not a thing to savor, but neither was it a thing to fear. That truth followed her through marriage to a gentle rancher named Thomas Calder, through the years they built their place plank by plank, through the winter fever that took him when the doctor couldn't reach them in time. It followed her into widowhood, into the quiet routines, into the way she kept her land alive by stubborn work. Now it followed her back down the mountain. Eliza reached town 3 days after the fire. She didn't go to the sheriff. The sheriff drank at Rourke's table and owed him money. She went to the blacksmith and bought supplies with coins she'd sewn into her hem years before. She spoke to the storekeeper, the preacher, the liveryman. She listened more than she talked. By sundown, word had spread, not about the fire, but about something else. Someone had mentioned mountain lions. Someone else laughed and said the widow once killed one with a knife. A third swore she'd done it twice. Rourke laughed when he heard. Stories, he said, swirling whiskey. Women make stories to feel bigger. That night, Eliza moved. She took one of Rourke's cattle from a back pasture and left it where the wolves ran. She cut the fence in a way that would take time to find. She loosened a bolt on a wagon wheel and fixed it again just enough that it would fail later, on the road, not in the yard. She did not hurt anyone. She didn't need to. Men like Rourke relied on order, their order, to keep power. Disrupt the rhythm and they panicked. By morning, Rourke was shouting. His foreman blamed the hands. The hands blamed the fences. The sheriff blamed bad luck. And somewhere between the shouting and the blaming, doubt crept in. Eliza watched from the edge of things, stepping in and out like a shadow. When Rourke hired riders to guard his property, she led them on a long chase through ground she knew better than any map. When he doubled the guards, she rested and waited. Patience was a lesson she'd learned early too. The first time Rourke saw her after the fire was in the street. She didn't stop. Neither did he. They passed close enough that he smelled smoke in her clothes and iron in her resolve. You ought to leave, he said, trying for easy menace. Nothing for you here. She kept walking. You already took what I had, she said, without turning. Now you'll give it back. Rourke snorted. You think stories scare me. That night, a mountain lion screamed on the ridge above his house. The sound froze him where he sat. It froze the guards too. It was a raw, Terrible sound, like a child crying through broken glass. It echoed and faded, and the men stared at one another, faces pale. Eliza had learned to mimic the call years ago, not to taunt, but to track. She knew the wind, knew how sound traveled. She let the scream hang in the air just long enough to do its work. The next day, one of Rourke's men quit. Then another. They said the land was cursed. They said the widow was a ghost. They said she knew things. When Rourke finally went after her himself, it was in the open. He found her at the edge of what had been her ranch, standing among blackened posts and ash. She was rebuilding a fence alone. He brought 2 men. They stayed back. "You think you can break me," he said. "You think a few tricks make you dangerous." Eliza leaned on the post mall. "I don't need to break you," she said. "Just show you what happens when you push the wrong person." He reached for his gun. She was faster. The knife flashed. Not to strike, but to stop. Steel met leather. His hand froze in place, pinned by fear more than force. She stepped close enough that he could see the old scars on her arms, the calm in her eyes. "I don't want your blood," she said. "I want my land." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Rourke let go of the gun and stepped back. He looked at the ashes, the empty space, the woman who would not bend. He backed away again, and again. Within a week, papers changed hands. Rourke sold her the land he'd tried to steal, for a price that stung his pride more than his purse. The sheriff found his courage somewhere and signed where he was told. Men stopped laughing. Eliza rebuilt. Neighbors helped this time, bringing boards and nails and quiet apologies. She accepted without comment. When the house stood again and the smoke cleared, the land felt like hers in a way it hadn't before. Sometimes, at night, a mountain lion screamed on the ridge. Sometimes it was real, sometimes it wasn't. Either way, Eliza slept just fine, her knife within reach, her resolve sharper than ever.